Hey, check out this meme Jessica showed on Facebook. Hang on, sir. I'll be right with you. Hello, sir. Welcome to Joe Bob's Auto Parts. How can I help you? I got a 2001 F350 to 7.3. I need a set of injectors. Oh, okay. What year model is it? 01. 2001. That's an 01? Yes. 2001. 2001. What was this, Chevy? No, it's a Ford. Oh, Ford. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, they've been making trucks for a while. That makes sense. Ford makes trucks. It's a 3500? No, 350. Oh, Ford didn't make 3500s. Okay, I got you. Okay, so what did you need? Injectors. Fuel injectors. I don't know. Let me talk to my manager real quick. Okay, so my manager says no. Just no. No what? No to what? What does your manager say no to? Tell me what your manager says no. Yeah, actually, you know, Ford didn't put injectors in their engines that year, so they don't even have fuel injectors. Yeah, that's what the computer tells me. I don't know how it gets fuel in there. Is it osmosis? The principle of osmosis. That's how you think. I guess I just need some air freshener then. What year model is it? No, I'm not gonna tell you which. Who in the hell needs to know the year model for a freaking. Now that it's been sitting here charging for about an hour, let's try it again. So this is the truck. It is I believe it's a 2001. If you guys don't know, on these trucks, all the way down there's a sticker down there will tell you all the information that you want to know. 11 of 01, so this would be considered a 2002. So it is a 2002 F350 four-wheel drive, four-door long bed truck. It has, I believe, 410,000 miles on it. But when the batteries are fully charged and I do that test, like I showed you guys how to do in my other video, and I'll show you again. The motor sounded really, really good. Inside of the truck's not too bad. It's been, used as a work truck, normal work truck stuff. Every Ford I've ever been in, this freaking seat's ripped. Dash is all together though, other than the radio's missing. But back's not bad. Somebody's, spit cup or something. Needs a really good deep cleaning, and then the bed it's just a work truck. But we got a really good deal on it. And so Chucky and I made a little deal on this where he would buy the truck. We're supposed to pull the engine out, rebuild it. I was gonna rebuild that and the transmission. We're gonna do a little collaboration video. And then I never got around to actually going to his place, pulling the engine, because I didn't have some other stuff lined up, and I needed to have X amount of money lined up before I started a project like that, and it just really wasn't pressing at the time. So, in the meantime, I'm not gonna pull the engine out of this because I think the engine's pretty sound. I know it's got 400,000 miles on it. Might not be its first motor, I don't know. But if you do the, what I call the digital compression test, I know there's an actual digital compression test that's using an oscilloscope for it. You spin a starter over without it starting and you listen to it. And if you can hear a consistent sounds just exactly the same, then the motor's pretty, sounds pretty equal. Now, it's not a foolproof 100% method, I understand that, but it's just a real quick way. When I hear an engine start, if you hear it go, what you're hearing is you're hearing loss of compression in one cylinder or more, and as that cylinder comes up, the crank is able to speed up just a little bit because it doesn't have to fight that compression on that one cylinder as much. And so you're hearing the other cylinders make the constant yin, 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 and then that little variation, yin, 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 like that. That's the engine speeding it up a little bit and then going back down to normal. So this one doesn't do that at all. How I do that on these, and all Powerstrokes, even the 6.7s, all have the same exact connector. I think that's all the way from 1998 and newer. 2008s, 2018s, 2019s, all have the same connector. If you look over here on the passenger side, there will be a single wire and it'll have this little round connector like that. What you do is you push where the tabs are, you pull out that connector like that, and if you look down the side of that connector, there's a little pin down in there. Over here on the positive side of the battery cable, piece of thread that's really, really long. If you don't have anything attached to that, and you have here, you can pull this, there's enough slack in this wire right here to come over here and touch it. And so you can hear on this one, I don't know if it really transfers over to the microphone very well or not, but you can hear the engine sounds pretty normal. On a 7.3, you shouldn't hear a very low yin, 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 yin. That doesn't mean that your 7.3's got more power than the rest of them. It means that your batteries are weak, your starter's weak, your cables are weak, or all of them need to be replaced. I don't know how many 7.3s I hear start and they're slow to start, whatever, but you hear them go, I'm like, yeah, it needs new batteries probably, or a starter. And guys are like, oh no, they're perfect. Anyway, very good way to test. And just so you guys know, in my opinion, if you're cranking on an engine, trying to get it to start, I will crank about 10 seconds and then let it cool down for 20, 10 seconds, 20, 10 seconds. After I've done that about 3 times, I'll usually walk away for a few minutes, 5-10 minutes, and then come back to it. If you've been cranking on an engine more than, let's say, 3 sets of 10 seconds, you've really, really worked that starter, your cables, and your batteries pretty hard, so let them rest, let them cool down a little bit. So the Ford 7.3 liter, if you guys don't understand what that means, 7.3 is how many liters of displacement the engine makes. All that is if you're looking at the piston, when the piston comes to the top of the cylinder, if you were to measure as low as that piston completely went down into how much fluid that took to fill up that cylinder, then you multiply that by 8 because these are V8 diesel engines, and then that's 7.3 liters or somewhere around there, pretty close to there, which is about a 440, 450 cubic inch engine if you're going off like the the traditional American style. But these engines were not horsepower monsters. They were not torque monsters. They made about 250 to, or depending on the model, between 250 to 275 horsepower and around 500 foot-pounds of torque. For its day, it was really good, but by today's standards, I mean, you got V6s almost making that same deal, and cost less. But with a little work, these things really came alive. So as something as easy as a tuner, an exhaust, you can really bump that number up from 275 to 380, 400, something like that. With some injectors and turbo, I mean, these things are making 700-800 horsepower to the wheels. But the 7.3 is fundamentally different than anything else in the market because the 7.3 and the 6.0 have a hydraulically actuated, electronically controlled unit injector, a HUE injector. I think I said that right. Well, all it means is it's got high pressure oil it uses high pressure oil, hydraulic pressure to force fuel into the cylinder, and that's what makes it fire. But because it has that high pressure oil, you've got another component in a diesel engine to heat things up and to go wrong, and they have plenty of their own faults. And just I wanted to give you guys a real quick rundown of the actual components on top of this engine, so those of you that are new to diesels or not that familiar with 7.3s, I'm going to name the components, tell you kind of what their function is, and if I can think of anything off the top of my head that's like a common problem with these, I'll say this is a common problem for you to look for. So I do challenge you guys, if you want to learn all about the 7.3s and 6.0s, go over to Diesel Tech Ron's channel. The guy did pass away a couple of years ago, but his channel is still active, and I'm sure his family is still appreciating the revenue and the money from the videos. I learned a lot of what I know about Ford Powerstrokes from Diesel Tech Ron's videos, and the guy's got he had a fantastic personality on video, very, very calm. But anyway, so your Ford 7.3, this box over here is your air cleaner. There's an air filter inside. This is the actual filter minder is what they call it. It's got a little sensor on here. Once this little plunger is pulled up, it'll close these contacts, and I'll do the light on the dash. Your intake goes back to your turbo. Your turbo comes over here, and it looks kind of weird. This throws a lot of people off because the output of the turbo comes here, goes over to this pipe. These two are connected, but there's a divider in here to where this one is separate from this side. They just made the component together. So I call it the Y pipe. A lot of guys call it the Y pipe. There's two different Y pipes. There's this one and there's one on the back of the turbo that I'm not gonna be able to show you on the video because I can't get into the truck. Your turbo blows compressed air through here, down this hot side boost pipe, down to your intercooler, which is in the front up here, and I'll show you guys that. Goes through the intercooler, comes back over through here out this side on the cold side. You can even see the boot there, it says cold side only. The cold side into here, and then it goes down and it splits into two. Your intake over here, your intake plenum, and intake plenum over here, and then it's just, there's no throttle blades or anything because it's a diesel, and it ends up feeding as much fresh air as it can get into the cylinders at all times. So you got your alternator. This little cap right here is technically your only fuel filter, and I say that kind of like that because there's two strainers in the tank that are also fuel filters too. So in my consideration, this is the only filter that I can, this is the only filter that I'm concerned about on these trucks. I usually take the ones in the tank out, but you unscrew that. There's actually a valve down over here. You open that valve, it'll drain the fuel out of this fuel filter housing. You can pull the old element out, put the new element back in, put the cap back on, and when you go to start the truck, you just turn the key on, engine off, and you'll hear the electric fuel pump come on. Two relays. If you take the solenoids out of the loop and your glow plug controller can't control the glow plugs, then it won't work. The older models only had one because these are the glow plugs in the cylinder. This one goes over to just your intake. There's a little heater in there. A lot of guys take these out, plug them up, think it robs power, doesn't rob power, I don't know. On your boot itself, you have your boost pressure gauge right there. Above it, you have your wastegate control valve, which is this fella. What this does, it takes this little green hose here, goes over to your intake right there, comes in here. There's a very, very slight vacuum in here when you're running down the road and you're actually building boost. There'll be some vacuum here. It takes that vacuum, this valve will modulate or open, goes to this red hose right here, which goes all the way back underneath there and actuates that wastegate. And then when that wastegate opens up, it lets some of the exhaust pressure bypass the exhaust housing on the turbo, and then the turbo spools down, so you're not making as much boost. Some guys, I drove around with this thing completely disconnected off my wastegate for, I don't know, a year or something like that, and it was fine. You're not supposed to. It's supposed to be bad for the engine or whatever, but if you pull this off, then you get whatever amount of boost that your turbo is capable of putting out. And these little bitty baby turbos are probably like 35 PSI max, something like that, or 36, somewhere around there. If you can see these hoses, there's one here. There's actually one that goes over to this other side that's buried. It's all the way down in there. There's a high pressure oil pump down there. So that temp sensor right there, your engine oil temp sensor. This is your ICP pressure sensor, or injection control pressure sensor, I believe is what it's called. If your truck won't start, when you come out to start it up, if you disconnect this like that, leave it disconnected, try to crank it and it fires up, most likely you've got a faulty sensor. This sensor is faulty. You can see when I did that, all the oil that's in there, and then there's a bunch of oil. So it needs another sensor and a pigtail. And that oil is coming because in this rail right here inside the cylinder head, there's high pressure oil. Now I can't get really good video of it because it's way, way down there. But if you follow my hand way down here, where I'm pointing, there's an IPR solenoid down there. The most expensive electronic component on the engine, pretty much. Like 150 bucks or 100 bucks for them, something. And all it is it's a electronically solenoid controlled pulse width modulated valve that opens and allows high pressure oil to go through this line, that other line, fill up both the reservoirs in each head. And depending on how much demand you have, you can get up to, I believe, 2,600 PSI in a factory one or something like that. If you have a tune, they usually get it to like 3,000 or 2,800. And that's pretty much it for the top side of the engine. So on the front of the motor, right down here in a weird, goofy spot, there's another cylinder sensor right there. That's your exhaust back pressure sensor. You can't really see it that well. There's a better shot. So that exhaust back pressure sensor threads into a tube, and the tube goes all the way over through here, down there on the passenger side exhaust manifold, and goes in there. Sometimes that tube gets clogged up. What that does, and what that's for, it'll two things. One, when you first start the engine in the morning and it's cold, there's an exhaust valve in the back of the turbo right there. You can kind of see the top of it. Looks like a right there. Kind of looks like a freeze plug on top. What that is there's a shaft that runs all the way down, and then there's a valve on there. Looks just like a throttle body. There's a valve on the bottom that's connected to the pedestal. On the pedestal the turbo sits on, and then it gets engine oil pressure, and it'll actuate that valve. So whenever it's cold, you first get in it, that valve will be all the way closed, and then it's trying to heat the motor up a little bit. If I remember right, if your exhaust back pressure is too high, or not high, I think not high enough, it'll close that valve to try to build exhaust back pressure and rob you horsepower. A lot of guys, they may actually have a kit where I can delete the pedestal and I can delete that valve, that blade in the back. I just happen to put one on. Take this line off, I believe, and there'll be an orifice tube and that little AC. This is like a little vacuum canister. You have a little vacuum pump right here. It's electronically controlled by the ECM. That vacuum's only function is to control the air conditioning doors, like the blend doors, and if you have four-wheel drive, automatic four-wheel drive, you know, the shift on the fly or shift on the dash or whatever they call it. And that's it for the top side. There's a couple things I can't really get to. So I'm not gonna crawl around underneath the truck right now because I'm really not dressed for it. I don't have the time for it. But down here on the kind of passenger front, in the very front cover, there's a camshaft position sensor there. Ford doesn't use a crankshaft position sensor on these. It just uses a cam sensor only. And that is a huge pain in the butt, because if it goes out, you'll know when you get in, you start cranking the engine over. When you crank the engine over, you look at your tachometer doesn't move at all. Or if you have a scan tool hooked up, you're getting a 0 reading RPM, or you're getting, you know, like 5 RPM or something like that. Your cam sensor's bad. If you get a cam sensor, only get one from International or Ford. Don't mess around with the Dorman products, the Eklunds. I haven't had any of them work. I've had a couple of them work out of the box and then crap out. If you work on a lot of these, always keep you an International camshaft position sensor on these. They change the colors from year to year. The most recent one I used is half black and half gray. That was straight from International. Those are one of the most common things to go out on these trucks, and they'll either go out all of a sudden or you'll just come out and it just won't start. The fuel system on these trucks, pretty easy. Inside the tank, there's not a pump or anything. There's just this little plastic deal that looks kind of like a pump, but it's not a pump. That thing's clipped together. You take that thing out. There's these little cylinders in there, these little strainers. On a 200,000 mile truck, the strainers will be almost solid black usually. Myself, Diesel Tech Ron, and a bunch of other guys on YouTube pull those strainers out of the back and just throw them away. We don't put them back in because the fuel filter on these works so well that it's going to catch anything that's in the tank anyway. And as far as in the tank, there's a sending unit. And what that is, got a little float on it. It tells you how much, it gives electrical signal to your gauge on your dash, showing you how much fuel you have. And it has a pickup tube, and that's it. That's all there is. And a return tube. So there is no pump inside the tank. If you go down the fuel rail, or if you go down the frame rail to these trucks, all the way up underneath here, the driver's side, there would be an inline, looks like a filter, but it's not. It has a big warning label on it. It says high pressure fuel or something like that. That is your fuel pump. From your fuel pump, it comes out, it goes up to your supply, which is the bottom of the bowl, fills that bowl up, goes to each cylinder head on the back of your passenger side, on the front of your driver's side. The lines go in, and it supplies about, I think, 38 to 45 PSI of diesel fuel to your injectors. Now, it's pressure regulated by this return spring. They call it a valve. All it really is a spring and a little piston cup. The return spring, and it goes from here all the way back to the tank. Some guys pull, there's kits, you can pull these out, you can set them at, you can shim them, or you can set them at like 60 PSI. I don't know if any high horsepower guys that have actually bothered to do that. I don't think the high horsepower guys really, I don't think going from 45 to 60 PSI fuel pressure is necessarily a good thing, going to gain you any results out of it. I could be wrong. I didn't actually, look at any dyno numbers or anything, but I don't really understand how you're going to cram more fuel into the injector because you have it from 45 to 60 PSI. Once it's at pressure, it's at pressure. Anyway, that's a real quick synopsis of this Ford 7.3. So some of the things that I hear about, the Ford 7.3, that's a lot of misinformation, in my opinion, misinformation. I'm gonna piss a lot of rednecks off. One, any 200,000 mile 7.3 injectors are worn out. The nozzles are worn out. They've had too much fuel crammed through too small of an orifice for too long for them to not be completely worn out. Now, you might have the one that just starts up just fine at 200,000 miles and it's working, but they're not working as efficiently as they did new or they were designed to work. A truck that has to be started on ether, or you have to cycle the glow plugs, 2 or 3 times because, whatever reason. And I've heard freaking guys several times, oh man, you gotta cycle the key a couple of times. These 7.3s are high compression. Well, they're like 17.5 to 1 compression or something like that. And new trucks, that's comical to new diesel engines. But what it is it's using the glow plugs to compensate for failing injectors, because once the cylinder is warm, it doesn't need as much atomized fuel to have combustion. When it's cold and that injector is spraying not a fine mist, it's kind of droplets and stuff, it takes a long time for that cylinder to warm up and get enough compression, enough heat to actually ignite the diesel. And that's usually what's going on when I run into a Ford 7.3 that's only starts with ether, only starts with gas rag or WD-40 or whatever the hell they're spraying in the intake. They're always like, oh, when do you put glow plugs in it? Put glow plugs in it. Well, probably, and probably needs glow plugs by then too, but more than likely it's just the injectors. So at 200,000 miles, yes, they're effectively worn out. Are these million-mile motors? Some of them are, but there's some of pretty much every engine out there that's the million-mile motor. I don't give a crap what brand it is. Doesn't matter the brand. There's more than likely an engine out there with 500,000 miles on it. There are a lot of these trucks running around with 300, 400, 500,000 miles, and if you ask my opinion, it's because they didn't really make enough power to tear themselves apart. For one, the tolerances are a lot looser on like the rebuild tolerances were a lot looser on the motor. They had a little more beef to them, so they could put up with a lot of torture for longer, especially at lower horsepower levels. Newer trucks like the new Ford 6.7 and the 5.9s, you get them to higher horsepower, higher torque numbers, you start running into transmission problems, actual engine problems like snapping crankshafts, rods, stuff like that. And 7.3s did their fair share of wiping out cranks and rods as well. They can be million-mile trucks, but it's subjective. It depends on what they're used for, how well the oil changes are, how much the maintenance you've done, and sometimes they're just not designed to last that long, just for whatever reason, faulty from the factory or something in the materials. Do I think the engine is just breaking in at 200,000 miles? No. If your standard after new engines they'll be broke in right around 10 to 15,000 miles. They'll be completely broken in and there's no more breaking in to do. At that point, they're just gradually wearing out, just like every engine does. It gradually is going to wear out over time. So no, I don't believe that 200,000 miles is just barely seating in the rings. People get that because they pull the cylinder heads off, they look down in the cylinders and they see crosshatch marks in the cylinder and they think, oh, well, once those crosshatches are gone, that means the engine's worn out. Like, no, that doesn't mean hardly anything by today's standards, because the rings are going to wear out and the pistons are made of aluminum, so the pistons and the rings are going to break before the cylinder walls, get worn out like that. So I think that's a misnomer. No, these engines aren't like huge, torque monsters or anything like that. So another question I get, is a 7.3 a reliable engine? Is it the best motor for diesel engine Ford or International ever made? I don't know. I do think they are reliable engines. They will put up with a tremendous amount of torture. I've worked on them when they've been run completely out of coolant before for a long period of time, and just replace the water pump or whatever and fire it up, no problems. They're really not likely to blow head gaskets. I don't really do that much internal work to them. Just the seals and the stuff that attaches to the outside is primarily the only thing that I do in injectors and injector cups, most common. But they are fairly reliable. I think they're a little more reliable than the Duramaxes I've had access to, and not as reliable as the Cummins of the equal year model or anything, at least in my opinion. Fuel mileage on the 7.3. They all get terrible fuel mileage. You'll see some guys on the internet claim to get 18 to 20 miles per gallon if they got a really light foot and they're drafting and doing everything right. They probably are getting that, but most people don't drive like that. Your average 7.3 that I've driven and operated, anywhere from about 10.5 to 13 miles per gallon, and that was on a good day. Most of the stuff that I operated was pulling a trailer or a big heavy truck or a service truck. I wasn't just lightweighting it down to the beach or anything, with a cooler in the back. It was always with weight, so my numbers were always just a little bit lower than what you normally get. I think you could probably conservatively say around 14 to 15 miles per gallon if you had a light foot. What kind of oil should you put in a Ford 7.3? Do not jack with the weight rating, or the winter rating. People say weight, that's a misnomer. It's actually winter rating, but the viscosity rating, don't jack with it. The only way I'd tell you to jack with it is if you switch over to synthetic. So like conventional oil is 15W40. Usually synthetic will be like 10W40 or 5W, I forget what diesel. So regular diesel oil will be like 15W40. Synthetic is like 5W or 5W40, 10W40, something like that. Should you use synthetic oil into 7.3 if it's had conventional its whole life? Absolutely. Drain out the old crap. When you refill it, put synthetic back in it. You're not going to hurt the engine. You're not going to weep seal. Like it'll be fine. You can mix synthetic and conventional all that you want. You just can't mix viscosities, and you don't want to mix diesel rated oil with automotive rated oil. Not because anything catastrophic will happen, it's just because one kind of cancels out the other. You've got one with different emulsifiers in it than you do the other one. Anyway, so fuel on these trucks, your standard, whatever you got available. These trucks weren't designed for any kind of ethanol additives or anything like that. You wouldn't be putting ethanol in a diesel anyway, but you never know, people are crazy. Your standard low sulfur fuel at the pump. I always put something else in with the fuel. I usually use Standardine, like their cylinder lubricator or lubricant or something like that. I've read a couple of guys putting 2-stroke oil in theirs and then like a quart of transmission fluid, and it's supposed to help bring back some lubricity to the fuel system to help lube your fuel pump doesn't really need the lube, but your injectors, the mechanical components in the injectors and nozzles and whatever. Don't know, I haven't seen any actual articles, but I've actually tested that theory or not. I don't think you're gonna hurt it in these. I think you can, follow that recipe, or just stick with Standardine and dump it in there. Every other fuel fill up and you're good. You can use the cetane boosters and stuff if you like. I'm not a huge fan of those because it's kind of, to me, it's like a temporary deal. Like to sustain that level of horsepower and feeling, then I have to buy that crap every single time. Now, I'm not saying, maybe once an oil change, run a bottle of that through the tank or whatever, it'll be fine if it makes you feel any better. I don't know if it makes it feel any better or not, but it's not gonna make me feel any better. So one very, very large warning to you guys about these trucks. These trucks are extremely easy to steal. All you need is usually a flat blade screwdriver and a hammer, and you're into the truck and you're good. So all you have to do, come over to the driver or passenger door, and you can tell somebody's already done this. Stick a screwdriver underneath here, go back, pry on that lock, it'll unlock it, then you're in it. So you hop in, grab your big screwdriver, hammer it into here, pop that cylinder out, and then you jam the screwdriver all the way in there and just turn it, and then you started it up. There's no key, there's no sensor on these. Ford didn't put sensors in the keys until like 2009, I don't think, 2010, somewhere around there. So what I like to do is take the fuse panel off, which is right here, take that off, find the relay for your ECM, pull that relay, hide it somewhere in the truck. What that'll do is when somebody gets in and they do that, all it's gonna do is crank and it's not gonna start. Something weird about people, and you know, we're all like this. I'm not saying I'm any different, so don't think I'm like singling anybody out. If you see somebody kind of running through the parking lot, they usually don't stand out in your mind. We're usually looking for people to be breaking into stuff. We're not trying to watch out for it because it doesn't happen all that often. Someone breaking into a truck's really not gonna stand out, especially if they walk over to the truck, they get in relatively quickly. Within 30 seconds, they've started the truck and taken off. You and I would just assume it must have been their truck and not think twice about it. In a parking lot, if you're walking through a parking lot and you hear an engine crank and crank and crank and crank and crank but not start, all of a sudden it gets everybody's attention. I don't know why, because most people aren't gonna be able to help go start that vehicle, but everybody, I've sat there and people watched in parking lots before and everybody goes, you know, looks around to see where that car is at. And I don't know if it's to look to see if maybe they need it, you know, they can help or whatever, but while that engine's cranking and cranking and cranking at 3 o'clock in the morning, they're drawing attention and that's what you want. So too much of that, they're gonna hop out of the truck and they're gonna go. Now, yeah, you're gonna have to fix your door lock. Yeah, you're gonna have to fix your steering column, but that's $150 worth of parts versus a $10,000 truck. So a lot of you guys have asked me about this. This is my topside creeper. It's been in a couple of videos. It's got wheels on it down there. The end, the feet just have little pads on it. To move it around, you tilt it up like that. And what it's for, it's got a step right there to where you can crawl up there and you put your chest on there. So your chest goes in here like this, and then you can sit here and work on whatever. So now, I mean, I could actually reach back and grab that turbo and work on it. It's a huge pain in the butt to have to rest yourself on top of sharp things. And we can do it, we're all tough, but if you don't have to be, then don't be. I don't remember the exact brand of this. It's Whites or something like that. I'll put a link in the video. Remember, you can't click on the link in the video. Go and click on the link in the description. Go over to Amazon and pick yours up. Now this one is not cheap. There's two different ones. There's one actually called a Topside Creeper. That's their brand name. I'm not a big fan of it. I like this setup better because this one uses a single pole. Where I'm moving around, I don't have these two, tubes coming up that takes up more space. This will slide up and hide out of the way a lot easier than something that's this wide. Yeah, check them out, man. If you guys work on a lot of these trucks, you'll be thanking me later. Trust me, it's better than it's better to spend the money on one of these than constantly have stuff stabbed in your chest. And when you get home, you've got all these like bruises and stuff on your chest, and your old lady thinks you're into some weird stuff at work. Okay, that's it for my Ford 7.3 video. I wanted to give like a quick kind of what stuff is. I know this isn't a huge in-depth deal, but it kind of answers some of your questions. I want to make as many videos on this truck as I can while I have it here. I think the injector cups are on their way. I'll show you guys how to do that job and do a couple of other repairs on it. And it should be a cool project. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. If you want to leave your comments, go to the description, go over to the Facebook page, leave your comments over there. My comments are still disabled thanks to YouTube. Not in my control, that's YouTube's deal. And if you want your own Topside Creeper, get over to Amazon and buy your own. And as always, the Amazon affiliate links, if you buy this or anything else on Amazon, I get a certain percentage, like 5 to 7% of that sale. So it doesn't cost you a dime, helps out the channel, and I really appreciate it. Hope you liked the video. Get out and fix something.